So today I'm going to be talking about teaching phonograms. So phonograms are the core to the Spell to Write and Read program. Phonograms are the core to teaching reading. And so let's talk about teaching phonograms today. So first of all, a phonogram is a single letter unit or a multi-letter unit. Multi meaning more than one. So one letter representing a sound of the language, or two or more letters, multi meaning two or more, representing the sounds of the language. So here we have two single letter phonograms, and here I have two multi-letter phonograms. So they represent the sounds of the language. Now we have in English 45 different sounds to our language. And obviously we only have 26 letters of the alphabet. So what do we do about that? Well, what we do is we mix the different alphabet letters together, just like I showed you here, with the, we're going to put together letters to now come up with more of the sounds than the single letters will represent on their own. All right, so let me give you an example of how the phonograms are representing what we call minimal speech units. So the phonograms are supposed to represent a sound in a word. And we're talking about just that sound as though it were all by itself. And so let me show you. And what we want to do is we want to focus on just the speech unit and not on blends. I'll talk about blends in just a moment. So let's take a look at this word. This is the letters, but it only has 5 sounds. So let's sound it out. S, t, r, e, t, street. So 6 letters, but only 5 sounds. That's because 2 of the letters are working together to make one sound. So that's what I'm talking about, minimal speech units. Pulling it apart. We talked about that last time about teaching phonemic awareness and having children being able to unglue words and glue them back. Now we're linking that process to the actual letters that are representing the sounds in the words. Now, when I said we don't want to teach blends, what's a blend? Well, here's an example of a blend. So we have the letters B and O, and those can commonly occur like at the beginning of words, like blue or blast or blind. So those are letters that are commonly put together. This is a consonant blend, so both of these are consonants. So the thing about this is there's nothing special about those 2 letters. They each say their own sound. So I can sound those out. B, bull, bull. I got that. But let's take a look at this. Absolutely nothing about the letter P or the letter H that will give you a clue that it together, those will say F. So we have to teach those as a unit. This is a multi-letter phonogram unit that we will call the 2-letter F. When I'm working with older kids, I actually teach them this is the Greek F. And that's because anytime you have a word that has this letter combination, it's coming from the Greek language. So I'll actually teach that as just the Greek F. And so we have to teach that as a unit because there's nothing here that tells us how to sound that out if we see that in a word. But the letters bull, each of those have their own sound. There's nothing magic about those. Now let me explain why this is so important that we want to focus on just the phonograms and not blends. We will learn blends. Blends absolutely are part of teaching reading and English and spelling. They are absolutely imperative, but they're not the level of importance as the phonograms. So let me explain. When we're teaching reading, what we're doing is we're teaching the child to instantly be able to recognize the letters and the letter combinations related to the sounds that they're representing in both reading and writing. Instantly. The brain has to work so fast to master this process. It is absolutely amazing how fast the brain works when you're reading. And yes, the brain is actually sequencing sounds. We look at words as adults and we say, well, I know that. I can recognize that. I see the word as a whole. No, actually your brain is processing, sequencing the sounds of that word. And we'll get into that in a few minutes. But when you're teaching any topic, when you're teaching any topic that's complex, and let me tell you, English is complex. It has over 1 million words. It is now a global language. It's used all over the planet. English is kind of bringing all the nations together. when you're teaching a complex subject, you want to narrow it down to its core components so that you can unlock that subject. So when you're teaching math, what do you start with? You start with the numerals, and you show how the number system works. And in most math systems, we use the base 10. So we show the children how base 10 works. So we narrow it down to its core components, and then we build on that. Okay, in English, the phonograms and the rules that govern how the phonograms work together to build the language, that's the core components. And so we want to narrow it down to just the basics so that we can understand how this language works. We teach 70 basic phonograms. There's some advanced phonograms that we get into when the kids are starting to learn more complex vocabulary. But there's 70 basic phonograms. Now that may sound like a lot, but actually kids pick them up very, very quickly. In fact, your kids are going to learn these faster than you do. Yep. You are going to have to hold on by the seat of your pants to catch up with them, because adults have to unlearn all kinds of clutter, all kinds of erroneous teaching that they were taught, unless they were taught using this kind of a method. They have to unlearn all kinds of things. And frankly, we don't have the memory capability that our children do. And so they learn these really, really fast. So don't let anybody tell you that they can't learn these phonograms. They can, absolutely. So when we're trying to teach 70 phonograms, it doesn't sound like a lot, or it sounds like a lot, but it's really not. They learn them very quickly. When you add blends, when you start drilling blends, having a card and the kid has to read bull and fur and grr and all of that kind of thing. When you start adding that, I remember reading somewhere that was like adding 76 more pieces to what are supposed to be the core components. But as I've already explained, those can be sounded out. This is actually 2 core components. So that is, we don't want to spend as much time on this. We don't want to devote the same kind of attention to blends as we do phonograms. And they will learn blends. We will absolutely address blends, but we do it in the context of words, in the context of the spelling lesson. So a phonogram represents a sound in a given word. So here I have one phonogram, but notice it says 2 different sounds. So in this word it says ow, and now it says ow, and in the word snow it says o. So we actually teach this phonogram as ow, o. That's how we teach that. When the child learns that phonogram, they learn ow, o. And then they're ready when they see it in the word like now, and they're ready when they see it in the word like snow. They're prepared because they know the sounds that are available for that phonogram. And when we do that, what we're doing is we're teaching in the order that those phonograms are used. We're teaching in the order of frequency. So here, for example, this is one of our phonogram cards. This is the phonogram a-a-ah. Now, what did I just say? I just said the sounds that this letter is going to say when it's used as a single letter phonogram, not when it's part of another phonogram combination, but when it's by itself, it will say ah, a, or ah. And why did I do it in that order? Because ah, what most of us know as the short vowel sound, ah is the most frequently used sound for that phonogram. So that's what I teach first. So then the second most frequent sound is a, and then sometimes it can say ah, like in father. Okay, so I teach it in the order of frequency. That way, one, the child has all the sounds that are possible. He is equipped to handle a new word. He's got at his fingertips, at his brain instantly for retrieval, all of the available sounds. And he's got them in the order of frequency. If I have to take a guess, I at least want to guess the most popular. And that way, I'm more likely to be correct. Now, I'm not saying that they're guessing, but actually, when a child is looking at a word they don't know, they have to use the tools we give them to try to figure it out. And if we give them the phonogram sounds and we train them to learn them instantly like that, they're going to be able to, and I've watched it over and over and over, they're going to be able to sound out words they don't even know. They're going to be able to decode, pull apart the code, and figure out what a word is, vocabulary words they don't even know. So we teach the phonograms in the order of frequency. All right, now, phonograms can also Oh, I forgot to say one thing. Phonograms, let me go back to this. Phonograms can represent one sound in the word. So here I have the word 8. So here we have a word. It has 5 letters. But how many sounds does it have? It only has 2 sounds. A, t, 8. Now, a little kid will look at this and they'll say, oh, what's E-I-G-T? What's all that about? Well, when we teach phonograms, it's a unit. We teach this. We teach the child to instantly recognize this is A, 4-letter A. This is A. And how do they learn the sequence of those? I mean, they learn to recognize it, but how do they learn to write it? Well, that's where the penmanship comes in. And when they're practicing their penmanship, they learn the sequence of the sounds or the letters for writing. And so they learn to instantly recognize this is nothing more than just 2 phonograms. And I know those, so I can sound that out. 8, 8. And so that's phonograms represent a sound in a given word. Okay, so phonograms can have a different number of sounds. So some of our phonograms can have 1 sound. So for example, this is a phonogram. It says sh. For example, in the word ship or Joshua. This is the phonogram E, and it can say E as in tree or as in kneel. Okay, so phonograms can have 1 sound. What's really nice, out of 70 phonograms, 2/3 of them only have 1 sound. So they're nice and easy for learning. Okay, so some of our phonograms have multiple sounds. Okay, so here's an example of a phonogram. It has 3 sounds. So we teach it again in order of frequency. Ch, k, sh. So when I'm working with little kids, here's a hint when you're teaching with preschoolers or kindergartners, I pretend like that is the sound that a train makes. And so when we learn this phonogram, we pretend that our arm is the, I don't know what you call it, that connector thing on a train wheel, and we say ch, k, sh, ch, k, sh. And when I was teaching my boys and they were little, we would get our brio and they would be playing with their little brio trains, and I'd say, now what does the train say? And they'd say chick shh, chick shh, chick shh. Now that was fun, but what I was doing was I was training their brain to instantly recognize the sequence of sounds. So when I came to this phonogram and I taught them the letters that represented those sounds, that sound pattern was already established in their head. And so they said that they saw that and they go, oh, that's ch, sh, I know that. And so let's look at these sounds. So it says ch as in charity. That's the Anglo-Saxon pronunciation. It can say k as in Christina. That's the Greek influence. And it can say sh as in Cheryl. That's the French influence. So which of those sounds is the most common? Well, it's going to be the first one, because again, we teach them in the order of frequency. Here's a phonogram. This says th. Now, what is that I said? My mouth, position of my mouth and my articulators is exactly the same. Tongue between the teeth, air flowing over the tongue. The only difference is the second when I turn on my motor, my voice. So this is something I do with little kids. I'll say, let's learn about our motor. We have a motor in our mouth, which is of course the vocal cords that are vibrating, but we talk about it with little ones as motor. And so we put our hand on our throat and we'll say, let's turn the motor on. Let's say, ah. So you there at home or wherever you are, put your hand on your throat and say, ah, and feel the buzzing of the motor. Ah. Okay, now say this. Is the motor on? Nope, motor's off. So then as we go through our sounds, we go through our phonograms, one of the things we're going to listen for is when is the motor on and when is it off. And in the case of this phonogram, the first sound, put your hand on your throat, say, are you doing it? Put a thumbs up or a 1 or something like that. Let me know if you're doing this there at home. So when you say, is the motor on or is the motor off? Well, in the first one, it's off. And then for the second sound, so when we say think, no motor. But when we say those, motor went on. There you go. Now, you have to be careful when you're doing that for a whole word, because vowels are always voiced. And so when I go those, if I hold it on the whole time, every sound in that word is voiced. So I just want to isolate it. That's what I'm trying to point out. Just the sounds are isolated. Okay, so That's not voiced, no motor. Th is voiced, it has motor. Okay, so that's the difference between those two sounds. And a lot of times adults, this is where I tell you, adults have to learn the phonograms. Adults have to relearn this. Kids pick it up very easily because they don't have all the clutter. We were given all kinds of clutter when we taught how to read, especially if we were taught using the sight word method, which is the prevalent, unfortunately, method that's used in the schools, and how probably most of us were taught. So we have to clean out all that clutter. So when you think of the word like think or those, you just think TH, okay, TH. Well, did you know that those have different sounds depending on whether it's voiced or not? So that's something that we need to teach the kids. Okay, so that's the phonograms can have one sound or they can have more than one sound. And we want to teach all of the sounds from the beginning. When I teach a, ah, a lot of times, the way we teach this is we say this is A and it says A. And then for a whole year, all I can give the child is a word that says A. That's limiting, severely limiting vocabulary. I can't have the child pick up real books, and read them because guess what? This can also say A and it can also say Ah. So, for example, the letter O, I don't have my card for that here, but the letter O can say ah, o, oo. It has 3 sounds. And in the 100 most frequently used words in the language, all 3 are represented. So if I go a whole year and all I teach is ah, and that means I have to limit vocabulary to only ah. That means I can't use the word do. Nothing the child reads can have the word do, because that's not the ah sound. That's the 3rd sound, ah, o, oo. The word to. Very simple. Go to the store. A very simple preposition. It's also part of a verb phrase. Can't use that because it doesn't say ah. So we don't want to limit children to just one sound. One, it reduces what they can read. It limits the vocabulary that they can read once they get up and going. Another reason is when children are learning the phonograms and learning the sounds, we want all of that information to be stored in the brain together. Remember I said the whole purpose of the phonograms is so the child can instantly recognize the sounds that are available for that phonogram for both reading and writing. The brain is working at lightning speed and they need to be able to instantly retrieve that information. If we teach it over a span of time, there's a program. I'm thinking of the ch phonogram, the one that I just showed you. Okay, this phonogram. Here's the example of Charity, Christina, and Cheryl. I know of a program. It takes 3 to 4 years before they ever introduce all of that information. And what happens is the child has instant retrieval for the Anglo-Saxon sound, but does not have instant retrieval for the others. And that information is not stored together in the brain. It's pieced out over time, gradual introduction. And the problem is the child then doesn't have that information available during the reading activity, which happens at lightning speeds. So we want all of the information presented at the same time for the child to instantly be able to use. Now, I've sat through talks at a homeschool conference where somebody said, oh, they can't handle that. We just teach one at a time. First of all, anybody who says that obviously has not worked with little children because they learn everything and they learn very quickly. They can memorize anything. I remember working with my older 2 boys when they were in a Bible memory program. We were doing a Bible tournament program, and my daughter was only 3 at the time, and she would sit on the sofa with us, and she would listen as we practiced our memory verses and practice for the tournament. And we were about a week away from the tournament, and I said, okay, boys, so I want you to start practice reciting your verses and whatnot. And she goes, well, can I do it too? I was like, what do you mean? And she goes, well, I know it too. 3. And I had never asked her to say anything. She just sat there. She'd just been listening. And she probably was saying it right along with the brothers, and I wasn't paying attention. And she stood up. She recited every single memory verse. She was able to answer every single question. 3. Okay, believe me, they can learn this. Like I said, anybody who says that they can't learn all of the sounds has not worked with children. I don't understand that. And we know from the brain research, from the reading research, they need all of the tools available to them to be successful. Okay, another thing is when we're teaching the phonograms, we want to make sure that we're teaching them in isolation. We're going to teach the phonograms. I mean, unfortunately, there's nothing cutesy about this card. But you know what? The brain doesn't need cutesy. In fact, cutesy and gimmicks and things like that, which we think make it fun. I'm going to talk about ways to make it fun. But the things that we as adults think are going to make it fun and we think are going to get it into the brain faster actually slow down the retrieval process. So when I say in isolation, all I'm going to do is teach sounds. A, A, ah. That's it. There's nothing there. Notice I don't have any pictures. It's not A as in bat and A as in babe and ah as in father. I am not giving them guide words because those guide words, what happens to the brain? Okay, the child sees this letter in a word and they go, oh, okay, bat. Okay, what was the sound in bat? Ah. Okay, this can say ah. Or the picture, and they're relating to the picture of the babe. Okay, it can say babe, A. Okay, it might be A. Or there was that picture of father, fa, oh, the sound. Notice how slow that is. No, we want instant, we see the sound, we see the symbol, and we can instantly recognize the sound that is represented by that symbol. Okay, we want instant retrieval. So we do not have any pictures. We do not give words. That there's five basic phonograms where we use words because there's no other way to differentiate them. But most of the almost every single phonogram, it's identified by the sounds, and then there might be some phonogram dialogue that goes with it. I'm going to come back to that. Okay, we also do not want to introduce the phonograms to music. Now I know that's fun. And it's just so much fun, and we can sing and we can dance around the room, and the little one enjoys that. Have a great time with music. We are a musical family. We love music, not when you're teaching phonograms, because what happens is the information is stored in the music part of the brain, and it's not available for retrieval when you're reading because the child has to go to the music part of the brain. So we want this stored in the part of the brain for reading, retrieval, and writing, okay? So we don't teach using music. We want to focus towards spelling. And you're like, well, I'm teaching reading. Why are you talking about spelling? They're actually interchangeable. Spelling is putting the sounds of the language into the code, the written code we call English that we're writing down. It's code. It's like Morse code, dots and dashes. No, we have letters. Okay, so when you're spelling, you're taking the sounds of the language and you're putting them into the code. When you're reading, you're taking those letters that are representing the sounds and you're pulling the meaning, the word, out of the code. And so we have to teach it as interchangeable. And in the teaching spelling, in the teaching spelling process, we teach them how the code comes together. And in the spelling lesson, we're teaching reading because we teach them how to put it into the code, and then we show them how to bring it out of the code. We teach both at the same time. So we're going to focus toward teaching spelling because that's going to show them how the language works. Okay, another thing we want to focus on is we're teaching by sounds, not by letter names. Now this is a biggie, okay? Most of us were taught this is A and it says A. And I already talked about the fact that we don't want to limit to just one sound, okay? But what people will say is this is A. So what is the child supposed to do? The child is now supposed to learn the name of a letter, and then they're supposed to learn the sounds. Maybe, because a lot of times people think just teaching the name of the letter is what you do to teach reading. And that actually is the opposite of what we want to do. We want to focus on the sounds. So notice I didn't say this is A. I said this is A, A, ah. A, A, ah. So when we're practicing reading our cards, we say A, A, ah. When I teach the little ones, they never hear this is A. A is one of the sounds that it says, but is it the most common sound? No, it's the second most common sound. And it's a sound that it says. The fact that it's the letter A, well, that's nice, but that's not going to help us for reading. Okay, so the first instant association that the child's brain has to have is with the sounds that are representing, that letter is representing. So I want to read you a couple quotes, okay? The first one is by Dr. Hilda Moss, author of the book, You Can Prevent or Correct Learning Disorders. And she says, knowing the names of letters does not help a child with reading English because the names of all consonants differ from their sounds, and the names of all the vowels indicates only one of their sounds. And we learned that it's not the most common. The most common sound will be the short vowel sound, and then what we know is the long vowel sound. Learning the names of letters first before learning their sounds confuses children. It is therefore better to teach their sounds first. The child can learn the letter names later, and we do that. We will teach letter names, but the first association that the brain needs to have, instant association, is the sounds. Dr. Diane McGinnis, author of Why Our Children Can't Read and What We Can Do About It, she says, knowledge of letter names did not promote good reading skills, whereas the knowledge of phoneme to letter correspondences did. Phoneme meaning sounds. So what was helpful for children learning to read? Understanding the sound letter, the sound symbol relationship, not knowing the letter names. They will learn their letter names, but that's not the primary focus. Now I've got a couple pictures I want to show you that talk about this, and the brain research just reinforces exactly what I've been talking about. So here's a picture of the brain, okay? And what this is illustrating, when, let's say we're teaching the word cat to the child, okay, the word cat. So this is the back of the brain. This is where the visual information is stored. So letter identification, K, C-A-T, the letter C, the letter A, the letter T, that is stored back here in the visual center of the brain. This part of the brain, this is part of the language cortex, and this is the part of the brain where the meaning of the word is stored. So this is an animal, okay? Unless we're talking about a girlfriend named Cat, okay? But we're talking about the animal here. And so the meaning of that word, cat, is stored in this part of the brain. The sounds that are represented by that word, k, a, t, are stored here. Okay, so when we teach, this is the letter C, this is the letter A, this is the letter T. What we're doing is we're inputting information over here. We're asking them when they read to retrieve from here and understand from here. Now the brain is amazing. I mean, God's finest work was in creating the brain, I think. I don't know, there's so many amazing things that he's created, but the brain is just amazing. And the brain can do amazing things. But when we want a child to be able to read well and fast and effectively and be able to focus on comprehension, then we need the input, the information inputted in the same place that we want them to retrieve it. Okay? So what does that have to do with teaching phonograms? So here's another diagram for you. So we're teaching the word cat. What the brain research is showing is that children need to learn to read the way that they learn to talk. So when a little child is learning to talk, they are hearing you say the word cat, and the brain is sequencing those sounds, k, at, and they learn how to then sequence the musculature in the mouth to be able to then produce those sounds in that sequence. And so they are actually learning a word sound by sound. Okay? So when they learn to talk, they learn how to put together k, at. Now when they're reading, they're doing the exact same thing, only they're doing it by looking at the letters. What are the sounds that are representing those letters? And then they're sounding them out. K, at, and then when they hear that, when they put that together, remember we talked last time about the phonemic awareness gluing, pulling words apart, gluing them back together. When they see those sound, when they see the letters, they're representing the sounds, k, at, cat. That's where cat. And then they know what we're talking about. So in order to get comprehension, they need to be inputting by sounds. And so when we're teaching phonograms, we want to be teaching the sounds because that's how the brain needs to retrieve that information. Okay.